It's time for another episode of Off the Record, On the Rocks. Join Michael Toner and Ankarino Lara and break down the latest news on all things Web3, AI, metaverse, and crypto, filtering out noise and connecting dots as we pour ourselves into the future.
Man, what is going on? Everyone is talking Apple Vision Pro. It is all over my feed. I've been watching the Casey Neistat tutorial video, the Marquez review video. I'm watching iJustine in the pool, tucking her battery into the headset. I mean, a lot of influencers got them early. I had lunch with Kathy Hackle when she was the first person in DC to get hers. I can update you on that, but let's talk.
Oh, man.
The era of spatial computing has arrived. Are you going to get one?
So I have my demo booked. My demo is for this Thursday, 11 a.m. Pacific, I think. The process of signing up for the demo at my local Apple store was smooth, seamless. You're basically Apple IDing in. I found it really interesting that it asks you a whole series of questions before your visit about, do you wear glasses? Do you wear contacts? How do you intend to wear, and all these questions about prescription lenses. Is it distance? Is it reading? Really kind of getting down into, I know they're collecting data, but I almost believe I'm going to come in there and have the Apple employee put it on my face and say, what's better, one or two?
Better yet?
Can you see the metaverse? Yet? How about A or B?
No joke.
I'm ready to go. But you've seen him in the wild, probably. I saw someone on a bike wearing it, which seemed dangerous. But
no, haven't sseen one yet. But I did see. Speaking of the both wearing glasses, there's only a few episodes with each of us wearing glasses. For the little Easter egg there. But the fact that Apple just got awarded a patent for basically programmatically changing the visual display to adapt to somebody's vision prescription. And this just came out within the past 7 days. I don't think I sent this one to you, but I think that's really interesting that that's what you're highlighting of the experience, that they've clearly gone to great lengths to make sure that those who, wear glasses or contacts can still experience this. At the same time, out the back door, they're getting patents that, why do they need to do that? Couldn't they just make the screen fuzzy or hyper focused enough to literally adapt? Isn't that what the lenses do anyway? Couldn't they just do that with the display itself?
That's not what they do. Maybe when you do go to the ophthalmologist and they turn those little lenses back and forth, that the magic of doing that automatically, you go to to get glasses, you sit down and go through 4 or 5 machines.
So unscientific.
Your eye pressure, just looking at, hot air balloons over grass, click the button if the periphery wiggles. And now all of that stuff is just going to happen. So you just made it make sense for me, right? Because now, why would I ever go get a prescription? My Apple Vision Pro, I'm going to be able to just look at the My Ophthalmology app, blink my eyes to click or whatever, and then next thing you know, it's just tell me what my prescription is and ask me if I want new Warby Parkers in the mail or whatever.
Absolutely. I also saw a great little highlight of Optic ID, and it was giving basically the timeline chronology of Touch ID, of Face ID, of what is now Optic ID on your eyes, and quickly racing to some sort of neural ID of how is Apple, if we I saw more stuff this week that they're getting patents that they've been working on this Apple Vision Pro since early 2000s. There was a schematic that they showed with the actual headset plugging into an iPod Classic. That's how far back that they have been working on this. So if you think about right now in 2024 and Apple's looking 10, 15, 20 years ahead, and we've seen Touch ID and we've seen Face ID, and now we're going to experience Optic ID, eventually, won't they need some sort of neural identification, some way to know that it's me doing the thinking, that it's actually me coming up with the ideas? I just have no doubt that this new world of spatial computing that Apple is ushering in, the hardware is not new. I think we can have a good discussion on this. The hardware is a VR headset, but I do think that the wider adoption of of this kind of experience where you're placing windows in space. I've seen a lot of the videos, people showing, walking through their home. They've got their desk set up in the spatial world. They've got their grocery list when they walk in the kitchen. When they walk in their bedroom, there's a packing list and all their travel itineraries. And they're pinning these windows around that concept. That is where you get to the Internet of Things. That is really, I think, the experience that people are going to start having, these aha moments of what it is going to allow us to do in the real world.
That is the biggest question, right? Is for all of our listeners, is people want to know a few things. Right? Everyone knows it's really expensive, but we want to know, like, what is it, and then why? Like, why am I using it? Because what you're describing to me, it also sounds like, there's an interesting split in the audience right now, which is, we all know that mass adoption of new tech is going to come from the young kids, right? We're talking Gen Zs. I mean, millennials are old now, right? We're talking the Gen Z, the Gen Alphas. These are kids aged 10 to 20 right now. This is the audience and demographics that's going to move, the entire industry in terms of behavior. But to start, you got to bring the goggles out, the big ski goggles, $3,500 before tax. And gosh, if you don't have an updated set of AirPods, we'll probably get those too while you're at it. You want an extra keyboard over here and this and this. I'm sure you don't get out of the store for less than four and a half. And yet that isn't the audience. Like, these old people like me coming in, talking about my glasses and my contacts and paying $3,500. That's not the 12-year-old who has perfect vision and who is totally comfortable running around opening windows in their world. Like you and me, I'm going to end up running into the wall trying to find my packing list hanging on the back of my door or whatever. So I find that they're in this interesting transition point where they have the device, like you said, and they've been after it for 20 years, but the audience that they're after right now is not actually the core use case. Right. So that's why I'm so interested. So, obviously gaming might be the reason why the young person moves in. Like, when you think about the apps, because I know there was all this talk at CES about VR and AR apps and different things for different companies, a lot of it coming back to gaming, and then you see these videos of people out in public, doing this in the air, and they're typing because they're touching a keyboard that no one else can see, which looks ridiculous. I mean, honestly, what do you see as the use of these right now, right? Like, why do I go in this Thursday? And why do I walk out of the store with one of them?
It is about, and I think that target audience that Apple is going after is the developers, the builders, the innovators, the folks who are looking at this with a bullish mindset, are thinking of this as a new era, because that is what Apple has always done, is then they seed this to the developer community to come up with the new use cases. There's stuff, there's apps in the iOS store that we could not have dreamed of, that Apple could never have dreamed of in the last decade, because they seeded it out and they let other people come up with the ideas. They let the market determine. And I think that's what this V1, and even to your point about they're not marketing to the younger generation, not with the price point, really not with the form factor. It doesn't feel, it looks cool, but it again, the hardware itself is not new. People have seen these headsets for a long time. But I also think, like, I showed those videos to my kids. My kids are like, "Are you going to get one?" And I was like, "We've got the MetaQuest. Do I need one?" I think that seeding to that generation of this thing is magical. This thing is going to allow us to work, do my job, to watch videos, to consume content, to participate in live sports. So I think it's seeding the content, or seeding the hardware and the experience to the developers, to the builders, to then figure out what we can do. And then the next generation of this, so much of the friction, almost purposeful friction, I think that they introduced, the battery, being one of the biggest ones. I think, trying to think of what I would consider other purposeful friction, having not experienced one, but watching enough of the reviews, like, there's things that people are like questioning, like, why didn't they do it this way, or why didn't they do it that way? And it's, well, because they need stuff that they're going to be able to fix later, so that it's the most powerful Apple Vision Pro. It is our most powerful. Every year it's the most powerful. So you got to have stuff
every year is the most
fix.
Powerful. I mean, so I agree. I think that there's going to be obviously a proliferation of apps that are going to come that we really haven't seen or come across yet. The the battle, it appears, for the metaverse, we always talk about the gateway to the metaverse being hardware, right? You got to open the big hardware gate. It's going to either be your laptop, it's going to be your goggles, it's going to be your future, much smaller format glasses, probably by the end of the decade. Some amount of hardware has to get you into the metaverse. But now what we're really seeing is that's like the gatekeeper. What's the keymaster? The keymaster is your eyeballs. And and it's a funny joke because even back 25 years ago, when we were working in Web 1, and you'd hear the rhetoric from like your corporate sales team say, we're in a battle right now for eyeballs. We need ad impressions. It's all about eyeballs. About impressions served, eyeballs. That's all they said. Yeah. It was a battle for eyeballs. And it turns out the battles are being fought for eyeballs for the last 3 decades. And now we're only really seeing that the real war, the battles have been fought, but the war in the metaverse is not just for the attention of your eyeballs, but it's for, I guess, the commitment and like absolute understanding at all times where your eyeballs are. It's almost owning them.
The uniqueness of your eyeballs is the thing. It's what your eyeballs are looking at right now at this moment.
And it needs to be your eyeballs looking at something. I need to tie those two things together. Yeah. And Microsoft knows this. We talked about this a few episodes ago. Microsoft with LinkedIn has done a deal with Clear. Clear being the way you use your eyeballs to fly and to prove that you're not someone who's going to do something bad at any point during your travel. And also, we know who you are. And if I'm playing my Xbox games, which, by the way, when Xboxes came out back around the turn of the century, for all those who remember that, it was really expensive and really big and got really hot and had one game. It was called Halo, and you had to go get it for that. And it wasn't 12-year-olds. It was 30-year-olds. We're seeing another parallel here, right?
Yeah.
Really expensive, really big, probably gets your head hot, but it's going to have a few killer apps. And then it's going to have, and I think this is what getting back to your spatial computing, the battle for eyeballs is really maybe even a red herring, because the eyeballs are just unlocking. And then, like you said, it's your brain. Ultimately, the neural link, I see it's Michael Toner's eyes. I can tell that he's got his goggles because it's tied to his phone, but I know his thoughts are his. I know his ideas are his. And that's where the metaverse gets interesting, where Apple says, I think they're going to say, well, to the doubt that the consumer would have, which is, well, I don't know what to think about. Like,
what should I be doing right now?
You show me what to click on, but if you're looking at my brain, how do I know what to think about? I'm like, oh, well, don't worry. We'll just say out loud, and Siri will hear you, and then it will just show you what you're thinking.
Dude, we've talked about this concept, and I've seen just a few little glimpses in the videos. People are doing a lot of like fake videos where they're faking the UI and they're showing what's possible, because I do think right now that's all you can show for people to see. But this concept of reality skinning, that's the first time I've heard that term. I saw it on LinkedIn. Somebody was posting this video of this. It was like a woman. She was walking into her boyfriend was like going through clothes in the closet, and she's like, honey, she's like, look over here. And he looks at her, and all of a sudden this interface pops up, and his face as she's swiping changes from Zac Efron to Tom Cruise to Brad Pitt. And he's standing there and she's smiling, and he's like, what are you doing? And she is skinning him through augmented reality into what she wants him to look like. And what does that mean in terms of reality? And how are we going to stay grounded? How am I going to know what's real from what's fake? Right now we're trusting that Apple is thinking about privacy, that Apple is, of course they have to be, but it is still definitely a privacy nightmare waiting to happen.
I mean, you're talking about skinning. I mean, this is not any
gaming,
any new magic trick. This was, let's talk about who was it first? Was it Snapchat who introduced filters at scale?
Yeah.
Which basically has evolved to the business desk with, you're at Zoom or whatever, and you say like, enhance my appearance so I can like smooth out my ruddy face,
change my background, change my face.
But before that, yeah, give me like darker lips. Like, I mean, that's like one of the most famous. Everyone wants to darken their eyebrows and darken their lips. I just do it because it's funny. But yeah, I mean, the skinning, now you're starting to call into question all of these things. I don't know if you caught it, but it was actually out of Hong Kong. I sent it to you either today or yesterday. But, whether it was completely true or not, the story is that $25 million was stolen, hacked, because clever bad actors set up a Zoom meeting with an employee, ostensibly one who's doing the right thing, and then had all the little squares of the other people in the meeting were actually not real people. They were skinned. They must have been some form of a human, but they were skinned, deep faked to look like this guy's colleagues, and they deep faked the voices, and they somehow got this guy to do a number of transactions, ultimately sending $25 million to this quote unquote new account, part of the new business venture of the company, which of course ended up just being, I think, the hacker's wallet or whatever. But now you're talking about privacy, and I can skin you. So like, what if you're my girlfriend and I'm like, let's just hang out together and like, we'll cook dinner and, we're going to fool around. Okay. But I'm going to be wearing these goggles and I'm going to not say anything, but I'm going to insist that I skin you like my ex. Now, at what point, where in what I just described was your privacy violated? Or if I never tell you, is it okay? Because let's just say like I close my eyes and I imagine myself kissing Brad Pitt or whatever I imagine when I close my eyes. Well, now I don't have to close my eyes. I can keep them wide open and I can see Brad Pitt. So where does the line of decency cross the uncanny gulch to where we're playing around with synthetic versions of humans, but only we can see them?
It's, I saw the go back to this Casey Neistat video, but he was walking around the subway with this thing on and people were high-fiving him. And I just think about like the first time you can probably remember the emotion where, maybe you were traveling on a vacation somewhere, but pulling out likely a Nokia or a Razr flip phone with a camera and you're taking a picture. And there was sort of this period of time where people were like, asking people out of the background, right? Like I'm taking a picture, I'm taking a digital photograph, as soon as like point and shoot cameras became really popular and people are uploading pictures to MySpace back in the day, people thought about the privacy of like, there was this, I didn't want to take a selfie if somebody's in the background because I don't know who they are, right? Or you've been in the background. There's another one. You've been the person in the background and you duck your head because I don't want to be in this person's photo.
Or you photobomb them because you love being in people's photos.
But Casey walking around with this thing, again, the technology anthropologist in me then sees nobody freaked out. Nobody told him, stop pointing that camera at me. Stop filming me, stop recording me, stop scanning my 3D geometry and in your spatial computer, sir. Nobody said that to him. It was accepted. And maybe because nobody's thinking about it or they just think that privacy has blurred. But I just think about, the computer vision that we know Tesla has been capturing and all of the cameras and all the footage. Now Apple's got a whole nother lens here. Maybe there's another use case of the why of Apple getting that product into the hands of these folks, because imagine just in 5 days, how much data capture they've got in terms of, the average space of somebody, like the average home size of somebody who bought this thing. They now know that, little things like that.
They probably actually already knew that from when you went in there to buy it. I mean, they're pulling up your address and everything else. Yeah, sure. Oh, okay, this guy, looking at that. But what that makes me think about is too the other side of it, which is we haven't heard the other side of the story, which is why it also makes me feel like a lot of these early videos of the Vision Pro out in the wild, I do question the authenticity of some of them, because and the only reason is, if you remember, is like back when I was younger, the equivalent item that you might wear on you that would draw attention, let's just say like in the early 90s, would be a pair of, Air Jordans. And you would go get a pair of Air Jordans, the new ones that hit, and they're different colors. And at the time, there was very few combinations of colors, right? It was like 2 or 3. But there were certain scenarios where you might choose to not wear your Jordans out to a specific area because people were being mugged for their shoes, right? Someone might come up to you and be like, hey, take those off, you don't want any trouble. And then leave you with no shoes. It literally happened to a guy I worked with in San Francisco right in 1998 or 9. Okay. Now, I remember having an iPhone in the wild, the iPhone, whichever the first gold one was. And I remember people on the plane like freaking out. Some guy from behind me like, hey, is that a real gold one? Can I see it? And next thing you know, I'm like handing the phone to people so they could touch it. And I'm on an airplane. So I figure, okay, well, they're not going to, it's
not running anywhere.
They're not running anywhere, but like still, it's kind of the awkward feeling of like, oh yeah, check it out, and like, oh, the weight's really cool. God, so nice thing. So I just wonder, okay, New York City in the subway, and no shade to New York or anything, but like people straight up get mugged in New York, and if I'm jogging in the East Village wearing these giant, very obvious $3,500
right
goggles that have supposedly won't work unless my eyes are looking, and this and this and all these other like safeguards. But you know how quick iPhones got jailbroken and sold in, overseas, and people were stealing them left and right. So I just wonder, like, are you?
But it's now Optic ID. You can't jailbreak it, right? You're not going to be able to. It's tied to your identity.
Well, you say that, and I believe it, but I don't believe that.
Yeah, you got to be able to clean it, start it over.
A $3,500 device on someone's head who's just wandering down a street and clicking in the air. And I'm like, oh, we're not only are we about to get those goggles, but I know this dummy's got a phone, a watch, and probably a bunch of credit cards. Let's go get him, knock him over, and get all his stuff and take off. It just, I talk about high value targets, I guess is all I'm saying. I would just question can you actually wear these goggles and be filmed and like make these fun videos where, okay, maybe the guy's got his pal filming and like 2 other bodyguards. It just doesn't strike me as true videos from the wild yet, because these are the fanciest thing I think I've seen Apple roll out in terms of cost, that there's been zero conversation about people getting them stolen from them, which just either there's not that many in the wild, or people who have them are being very careful.
Maybe one last comment on Apple Vision Pro, and then we can get your final takes here as you head into Thursday's appointment. But I did think about like a lot of the use cases of people driving the Cybertruck. Apple's a really smart brand. They're super smart. They had to have thought through, the implications of an influencer getting behind the wheel of a Tesla Cybertruck. I mean, somebody in some crisis communications workshop thought through this scenario, and I wonder, I haven't seen the instruction booklet. I haven't seen the onboarding process. Does it give you instructions that says like, don't operate heavy machinery while wearing this thing? Don't get in the pool, for example. Like, are there rules that they're almost putting in from the get-go? They didn't do that with phones. There wasn't that same rule book. So maybe they're not going to do that here. But and honestly, my first reaction when iJustine got in the pool was, oh shit, it's waterproof. It's not waterproof. But my first reaction was, oh, I didn't see that coming. Of course, a version 3, 4, 5, just like the Apple Watch, all the technology that they built in this thing to be waterproof, they're gonna build that in to the headset, and it's going to be a legitimate scuba mask.
And that is exactly what I was hoping you would say, because I am a scuba enthusiast. And the idea that what's the Apple Watch that's kind of rugged called?
Yeah, it's made for scuba. Yeah.
There's an Apple Watch that's rugged. It's like the extra like durable. It's like their G-Shock. I forget the name of it.
Yeah, I know.
But I imagine a goggles version of that extreme adventurer where, wow, look, it actually works for me when I ski because it already is a ski goggle. Oh, look, it already works for me when I'm underwater because it already is a scuba mask. Oh, look, it works for me when I'm in low atmosphere flying in, the Virgin Atlantic or Virgin Galactic, jump ships. And it works because it like pressurizes my eyeballs just so, or whatever they're going to say. And yeah, then you're going to see iJustine swimming around dressed as a mermaid, making spatial videos with all her pals. Who knows? Yeah. Maybe we'll all be there by the end of the decade. I mean, it feels like he said, the iterative steps, Vision Pro this year, what's next year's going to have?
Right.
When will it get smaller? When will it become waterproof? When will there be multiple versions of it, et cetera? I think we're not that far off, to be honest.
What I keep saying last thing, but what in the now we're in a pretty good like 12-month rotation with the phones, but I'd have to go back and look what the time delay from first phone to second phone was, because that is also really interesting to me, is that once Apple steps into a market, they are already on to the next version, if not the third, already thinking about the production to cycle down V1 and cycle up V2. What is that time delay?
I think we're a year. I mean, I think they were years out of the gates, because if we're talking like 2010 for when it really kind of hit mass market, and we're on the 15 and it's 2024. So
yeah, so
I
about every 12 months.
About every 12 months. So yeah, I think that, look, I'll report back after I take my my official meeting. I might end up walking out of that place with a big old fat, bag.
Big old box.
No. But I really am interested, and this maybe is a good segue for us, but one of the things I'm going to ask pointedly, and of course, I'm a little bit of an unusual consumer in that I have a business account for our company, so I'm going to be meeting my business partners who are not the normal guys who are out on the floor. But my thing that I want to know is, all right, when are we talking about transactions occurring in goggles or on the Apple iOS network that are in cryptocurrency? And when is there any information? Now, usually they don't have any information anyway, but sometimes just the reaction, just seeing how their body moves, gives you a little indication. Because you and I have talked about this at length. The idea of eyes looking around as your mouse cursor, I mean, amazing. Blinking to select, amazing. But how do I double blink to transact, and how does the crypto go out? And then that purchase, and that's what I know you're always about, which is the layer of transaction and of basically of value exchange. And Apple has been silent. They don't even mention anything about financials unless they're talking about, dumping their bank, Goldman Sachs for Chase or whatever, which I haven't heard any more about. But I'm really curious about that, because if you're wearing it and you're looking at things and clicking and blinking, yeah, it's going to be easy to buy stuff on Amazon. But what's the leap? A fancier point and click, that's not the leap to me. We got to find some interesting.
I will make our segue to our next topic to move into some more government regulation thing. But when you ask that question of the Apple specialist, maybe you ask them, hey, I've just navigated to irs.gov. Can I pay my taxes here through the Apple Vision Pro? You could be the very first person to pay your digital taxes inside of this new spatial computing metaverse, whatever we're going to call it. But that is the news coming out from Time Magazine. We've been calling it. I mean, I do think that the regulation getting set up for these instant payments, FedNow is a part of that. Paying your taxes is an important part of that. Bitcoin ETF is going to be an important part of that instant transaction. You wanted to jump in there. Go for it.
No, it's just a Time Magazine. I mean, wow. My joke is like, come on, just get with the times, guys. I mean, this has been talked about for more than a year, and their headline is, you might be able to pay your taxes for free because you only can't. I mean, my specialist at Apple better respond to my question when I ask what you just said by saying, well, are you a state or government employee? Because that would be the obvious next question, because those are the only ones who can at start. So Time Magazine, yeah, I think that's a great way to kind of lead them into that. But yes, this is April 15th. This coincides with the halvening for Bitcoin. This coincides with state and federal employees being the first to file for free via irs.gov. And then, gosh, I would say subsequently, it's us, you and me, if we file an extension for October, certainly this time next year, it'll be everybody. And yeah, I would bet you a $2 bill that you'll be able to look at that irs.gov app and just go ahead and process it right through your Vision Pro.
It is super interesting, the time finally catching up with that. We know it's happening. Other regulatory news with our pal Gary Gensler becoming a highly sought after meeting from the South Korean government, who I guess has questions about a Ethereum ETF, which we've also heard the rumors here in the States that it is now on a very similar trajectory as the Bitcoin ETF. I don't know. What's your take on this with South Korea coming to bow at the altar of Gensler?
I mean, that's something that I don't think I ever saw coming, to be honest. Now, they're talking about Ethereum, but they're also talking about Bitcoin ETFs. So this as I start to kind of play back some of the events of the last few months, we talked about how it felt a little weird that while there were applications in for a spot Bitcoin ETF from companies that most people haven't even heard of, like ARK Investments and Wisdom Tree and Grayscale Partners, et cetera, eventually finally caught up with real named banks that people know, like BlackRock and Fidelity and US Bank. Well, then suddenly it made the Bitcoin ETF more real. And, I would guess that based on the way it played out, there was a bit of a hurry up. We talked about it. Was it going to be, before Martin Luther King Jr.'s holiday? Was it going to be after? When are these going to be approved? Would they delay further? And the fact that they pushed all 10 of them or 9 of them out all at once and started generating a massive amount of money, of activity of people buying and selling these. You look at, Hong Kong has a Bitcoin ETF. South Korea wants to create a Bitcoin ETF, and they are seeking out our chairman of the SEC, Gary Gensler, who's often maligned for being like kind of or I don't even know what the right word is, but just being someone who legitimately never answers questions directly ever to anyone who asks him, including Congress. But he's being sought after by these governments to figure out how and when they're going to roll out these ETFs, which to me feels bizarre because it's not like the United States invented these things. Anybody can do it and have been doing it. They're in Europe, they're in Hong Kong, but for some reason, governments are going to be coming to us now to ask about how to do it, or maybe it doesn't sound like permission per se, but definitely feels like there's a certain a way of acquiescing maybe to the U.S. government, and maybe there's just enough international money flowing both directions that the South Korean government would not want to just create one of these and somehow have that directly impact one of the U.S. ETFs. So they want to coordinate. But that's all to say, this story is global. The story is about Bitcoin and about these weird IOUs that aren't real Bitcoin that they're calling the spot ETF. And if you can imagine, if South Korea comes online with this, Hong Kong already has it, United States, you start going through all the major powers with these, does enough governments around the world selling IOU versions of Bitcoin, does that create enough scale to just completely manipulate the price at all times of actual Bitcoin? I don't know. But the fact that governments are all coming together to talk to our government about something that's not a U.S. product, it's just an algorithm called Bitcoin, makes me feel like I don't like governments all teaming up and trying to control and tamp down the innovation in the technology space. So when I see stories like this, it makes me pause and wonder, why exactly are they asking? There's something else at play here, and I don't like the smell of it at all.
I mean, I'm reading here from Cointelegraph, South Korea regulator to discuss spot Bitcoin ETF with SEC Chief Gary Gensler. When the SEC approved its spot Bitcoin ETF, South Korea's securities regulator warned local firms against brokering spot Bitcoin ETFs from the United States. I mean, that to me is like that, the South Korea's Financial Supervisory Service, the chief financial regulator in the country, is planning to tap the United States SEC for insights into spot Bitcoin ETFs. That to me feels like they were already warned, hey, the states are going to do this. Don't go try to do this yourselves. We're going to talk to them. And then it gets brokered almost as if the U.S. gets to set the rules, set the guidance, set the standard operating procedure for whatever ETF product they're going to roll out. It's got to probably be built on Coinbase's platform. I don't know.
But you're probably not wrong. I mean, when you think about that too, there's we talked in previous episodes about what I forget how many of the senators were screaming the term, but the de-dollarization. We have to combat the de-dollarization around the world, right? When the BRIC countries, when Brazil and India and Russia and China all did some transactions like very brazenly without using US dollars. Well, we all, the US all took notice, right? Wait a second. What are you guys doing? You're de-dollarizing. We made an agreement. Yeah, we made an agreement that the entire world will use US dollars at all times for commerce. But wait, we didn't agree. Shut up. You have to do it or we're going to come get you. So now I almost think of the spot Bitcoin ETF as a weird analog, as like the dressed up masquerade version of the American dollar as it moves around the globe. Because if the United States is being asked by all these foreign governments how and when to utilize this new thing called the spot Bitcoin ETF, which isn't American owned, but we are basically saying, what are you talking about? It's not American owned.
We invented it.
And all these guys, we all invented it just a few weeks ago. And if you want to use it, you can. But that's the only way you can deal with the United States government, is either using USD, American dollars, or these spot Bitcoin ETFs, which are also made in the USA, says the stamp. And you're like, wait, I'm looking around thinking, wait a second. How the ghost of Satoshi Nakamoto is rolling in his proverbial grave.
Speaking of,
it's just code. But the United States is saying, no. We are not talking about the code. We're talking about the spot Bitcoin ETF, which has nothing to do with Bitcoin. It's fully backed by, guess what? American dollars. That's what me tells me. These two things are coming together. They're dovetailing into one thing. And they're going to be inseparable as we move up through this year.
They will, and it will continue to find its way into the political discourse as we're talking about AI regulation, which I think we will continue to talk more about. There's more EU news on AI, and I think we almost always rely on our European counterparts to come up with the first draft of the regulation before we are sort of forced to adopt it, right? So you're going to get more AI regulation. That will be the mechanism to regulate cryptocurrency. And the irony of what you said about Satoshi Nakamoto, I found this story from Wired, Wired.com from February 2nd. So we're recording here on the 5th, so just a couple days ago. But Craig Wright claims he's Bitcoin creator, Satoshi Nakamoto. But can he prove it in court? And this is a judge will determine whether or not he, is the rightful inventor of Bitcoin. And how important is that verdict before or after the halvening, so that the SEC can stand to say that this is in fact the CFT, a commodity, that there is no owner, that our Bitcoin ETF stands because the commodity is regulated by the CFTC. You know what I mean? Like, this house of cards, almost like this one feels like somebody forgot to check the box on the legal case that this guy is still out there saying he invented it. We need to prove him wrong, because you cannot have a centralized owner of that, or it would no longer be a commodity, right? At that point, he's asking for full control. It is crazy to me that Wired ran this story. And I have not gone down the conspiracy rabbit holes on this guy, so it was pretty much news to me when I'm reading it, but the guy seems to be very serious about it.
Yeah, I follow this for many years now, because over the years, since the inception of Bitcoin, there have been many people and groups of people who have tried to claim ownership as being Satoshi Nakamoto. Craig Wright actually has been floating around for years, and he even was up on conferences back in the day. And by and large, the Bitcoin community knows that this guy is just a charlatan. What I find interesting, like you say about the UK and us taking nods from their regulatory decisions and different things, is that this guy Craig Wright is trying to activate some, and I don't remember the exact acronym, but it's called the Crypto Open Patent Alliance, which is an organization that is backing Wright, his claim that he is Satoshi Nakamoto, and it's a UK high court. So to me, knowing what all we just said is that the UK might do the first draft or whatever, right? Because that's a great way of putting it. Because then when it comes over to our side of the pond, if I am an American who makes bets on the American government, making sure that they control the narrative, then I'm pretty sure that they're going to say, well, what are you talking about? This is the Bitcoin ETF. This is all news that is actually completely irrelevant to anything that has to do with our American products. Wired, I remember when Wired started, some of my best friends were first employees there back in the day. I think they, look like anybody else. They're trying to sell magazines. The article that you just, that you had sent me about this guy, Craig Wright, it has a banner running at the bottom that says you can get Wired for 50 cents a month if you click on the special subscribe now button. So I just sort of think anything that they run is just a, subscriber bait, trying to get, anybody run fish with gummy worms and try to get somebody to click and subscribe. I don't put a whole lot of stock in Wired's reporting, but that's just me when it comes to this. I hope and pray that there is no court that pretends to think that they can just quote unquote give Bitcoin to a human who claims to be the creator, which is so bizarre because it shouldn't be that hard if you are the creator. Just show us the Genesis wallet on your phone. It's like not hard. How he's going to prove it in court to the UK High Court? I imagine all these guys sitting around in big powdery wigs, getting hoodwinked. The same way our Senate talks to Zuckerberg, and they're like, "Well, I would like to know what the difference between a like and a poke is. Can you explain the difference?" I imagine that, but a High Court UK version for Satoshi Nakamoto.
Oh, it's so good. Oh, it's really good. I will move us forward into final thoughts as we head into Super Bowl weekend. Any predictions? You're going to maybe be watching the game inside of Apple Vision Pro when they pan to Taylor Swift in full immersive 3D. You're going to be singing the lyrics. I'm excited about the game. I have no doubt Apple will pull some trick out here this week. You're starting to see the super commercials break. I don't know your take. Are you going to be watching the game inside of AVP?
I mean, my take is I probably need to put my money where my eyes are and get a Vision Pro. We'll see if Thursday blows me away. This Sunday, the Super Bowl is going to be completely amazing, and I hope that there is at least one Apple Vision Pro ad. And if not, maybe an ad that's parodying people using them somehow. I do feel like that one more thing, like you said, is coming because it can't all just be immersive ways to watch Disney Plus videos, right? That's not the only use case for this. And live sports, we talked about, we want to sit on the sidelines. We want to be in the luxury box. I will ask those pointed questions as well. But I also know that if you buy the Vision Pro, you do have 14 days to return them and get a full money back refund. So I might just pull the trigger just to see what happens on Super Bowl Sunday. And you might find me there the next Monday.
I love it. Well, I can't wait to hear about it. We'll come back next week. We'll do it again after the Super Bowl. We'll see what kind of news Apple makes. Have a good rest of your week, sir. We'll do it again.
Hey, man. Talk to you soon.
That's all the time we have for this episode of Off the Record on the Rocks. Join us next week for more news on all things Web3. Check, please.